Hello and welcome to a very rainy London. I'm Mark Phillips from Bluefrog Fundraising, and I'm back again, incredibly excited to bring you this brand new episode of Two Peas on a Pod, alongside the always brilliant Giles Pegram. Today we have a very special guest, and for me it's perhaps one of the most important people in fundraising. Her name is Amber Nathan. You may not have heard of her, but she's Bluefrog's head of donor research. And she has been speaking to donors for well over 20 years. In that time, she has spoken to thousands of donors from across the world to find out pretty much everything about why people give to charity. And in this episode, she's going to share what she knows about fundraising from the donor's perspective, what works and what doesn't. And here's a quick sneak preview of some of the things we discuss.
If the charity in question is failing to give the donor what they need for supporting that cause, the donor doesn't really have a reason to stay. That charities could keep far more people on at a lower level. They may fail to develop them because, as per what you just said, the cause has become less relevant to them or otherwise. But yes, the sector should be ashamed of itself. If we can't keep people on at a very low level, that's absurd.
You know, and if you're at the point where, come on, it's only a couple of quid, is your offer, there is something seriously wrong with your strategic approach. I think the problem comes when you start wanting to go into a new creative direction because you want to go into a new creative direction. You know, when we look at rebrands, why rebrand?
Don't stop that again.
We can do that, but what happens when you do a rebrand, Amber? What do donors say?
Donors hate it. We know that. As in, right, donors that have money hate it. But then I get back on my soapbox. The point is that they're not the ones that are exciting to the people that have got the budget to do the.
Who's exciting to them?
So you'll learn what truly motivates people to give, whether it's combating that sense of helplessness, reinforcing self-image, or simply the emotional reward of doing something good. We talk about what happens to cause donors to stop giving, and Amber breaks down exactly why supporters lapse and what you as a fundraiser can do to help retain them. We also tackle some of the biggest mistakes charities make, like chasing after new donors whilst neglecting loyal supporters, and how the wrong messaging can push people away. And of course, we talk about what impact a charity rebrand can have on your donors. If you're looking for insights to make you a better fundraiser, this episode is packed with them. Just what you've been looking for, with great ideas to help you connect with donors in a deeper and more meaningful way. So without any more ado, let's kick off Two Peas on a Pod with Amber Nathan.
Hello, here we are again. And today's going to be a very easy intro for me because it is one of my favourite people in fundraising.
Oh, you mean not me?
One of them, Giles, one of my favourite people. So I've got a whole plateau of my favourite people. But Amber is one of my longest standing fundraising confidants and advisors. She basically does pretty much all of Bluefrog's research. She has spoken to hundreds, maybe even thousands of donors.
Definitely thousands
of donors over the last, how many years you've been with us?
20 years.
Over the last 20 years. She looks into everything, why people give, why they stop giving, legacies, in-mem, mid-value. We've looked at why different groups such as Hindus and Muslims give. We've done research in Canada, the US, Australia, and a host of other places. And if there's one person who does know why people give and why they don't, it's Amber. So I'm going to give Amber a big welcome. Thank you very much for coming along.
No pressure.
And I'm also going to have to remind, because Giles will be upset if I don't say we've got Giles with us.
Hello, folks.
Today. And Giles has never met Amber before, and we were discussing who we should bring along to to talk about why people give. And I couldn't think of anyone better than Amber. So we're here today, and we're probably going to have a chat for about the next hour. We'll be sharing loads of insights. Some of you might have heard a few conversations that Amber and I have had on the Why Do People Give podcast, but hopefully we get a whole load of new fun stuff today.
And
Giles, carry on.
one thing you do need to know, folks, is that Amber is the first of Mark's actual team that he's ever suggested be on 2 peas on a pod. The first ever. So no pressure, Amber. No pressure
at all. None.
Right, we done. Done our intro. Kick off. Amber, tell us a little about your job. Just a little about your job. What do you do?
Okay, so for the most part, I sit either face to face or online, and listen to donors or lapsers talk about the charities, why they enjoy or don't enjoy to be in a relationship with that charity, what they're worth to them. And my job is to come back to whomever it is that is creating comms and or otherwise for the charity question or a thought piece, and advise on what I think we should do about it. It's very much everything is based in trying to work out deep down what's the connection between that person, the cause they support, and how we can leverage that, how we can best leverage that to further nurture the relationship they have.
If we kicked off by saying, why do people give to charity? You know, that's a very broad question. Could you answer that?
Well, yeah, as in the broadest sense. They give because it makes them feel better about themselves. They give because for whatever thing they've experienced or know or feel that will in some way be related to that cause. If they didn't give, they'd feel a bit more rubbish. And then why do they keep giving? Because the charity in question allows them to continue feeling a bit better. And why do they stop?
What does that mean, though, feel better? When you say feel better, what do you mean? In what way does giving to a charity make them feel better? What's the underlying emotions that that's giving? It's never easy.
It's never easy. I'd say they're about to go on.
Let's talk about one specific donor group. Let's talk about, because it's, you know, when you talk about connection, you know, it's obviously it's pretty easy to understand someone's connection that they might have with, for example, a cancer charity or something like that. You understand that. What about an NGO? What about a development charity? The Oxfams, the Save the Children's, the UNHCRs of the world. Where's the connection there? Why does somebody give to help somebody, you know, living in poverty, you know, in the global south?
There's always 2 or 3 interconnected reasons. So someone can't cope with what it makes them if they look away. Someone can't cope with whatever you want to call that negative need state, be lazy and guilt, call it distress or anger or fear or whatever you want to call it. And then there's the thing that's pulling them to that cause. So for whatever reason in their personal history or background, there'll be something about the injustice that is potentially relevant to them, or there'll be something about the imbalance of power that was relevant to them. And it doesn't matter what the index commonality is, that will press their buttons. And you put the 2 things together, and that person can't not give.
So on the first one, when you're when you're talking about that, what you're really talking about is self-image. We have an image of ourselves, and if we fail, particularly at times of disaster, to help somebody, that makes us feel uncomfortable in the face of the image that we have of ourselves as an internationalist, as somebody who reaches out, as somebody who cares, as somebody who's of a particular political, religious persuasion.
Yes, but you've made a jump, as in that's the case. Sorry, it's not supposed to a debate as such, but that's the case for anything that person does at all.
Okay.
Everybody gives, everybody does everything because they have a sense of self, and if behaving separately or differently than that which allows them to define themselves is not how they're behaving, there'll be dissonance, and then they'll be unhappy, and then we go full circle. That's when a fundraiser might call it guilt, psychiatrists might call it something else. So yeah, self-identity, sense of self, really cheesy. We could map it out or Maslow if we wanted to, but you know, between the self-actualization and the not drowning or freezing to death is needing to belong and to be a valued member of a group, or however you want to phrase it, and the status that comes with that. Is that I'm not.
Giles was going to come in on a point.
Because Mark, you've talked about international NGOs, and Amber, as kind of said, it's broader. So can I pick on the broader issue? What you said, Amber, is that people give because they will feel better about themselves, and the other way, if they don't give, they'll feel rubbish. Those are your words: better about themselves and rubbish.
Yes.
I think a lot of fundraisers would believe that the potential donors would feel better if fundraisers didn't come into their lives.
Yes.
They feel that they're intruding
Yes.
on the potential donors' lives. And they go in with a sense of trepidation. And if they don't give, then they will say, oh, that's fine. I don't think that a lot of fundraisers have that sense that they'll feel better about themselves if they give and rubbish if they don't. And I think if all fundraisers had that perception, that would change an awful lot of fundraising. What do you think?
I agree with that 100%, but I also think, and this is a bit controversial, I think I've ever talked about this before, I think there's a massive chunk of the population who aren't like that. So I was answering the question for people that do in some way have a propensity to give. And I think that if I've understood you correctly, the mistake that a lot of fundraisers make is they continue to go after people that don't have those need states. So I don't believe that's the case for everyone, but anybody that could give or would be moved enough to give, yes, I believe those things are true. And I think you're right. A lot of fundraisers don't think that way because still taking from what they've learned from other people who are never going to give.
Okay, so one of my gurus, as Mark knows and a lot of you will know, is Hal Sumption.
A lovely man.
Described as the founder of modern fundraising. And one of his many epithets was, those who give,
yes,
and those who don't.
Okay, yeah.
And I agree with you. I think a lot of fundraisers think that everybody's the same. And so if they come across 3 people who don't have a propensity to give, they will have a sense that that's the way the population think.
Yeah.
Whereas if they accept that there are some people who don't give, and you don't try and persuade them, you leave them to one side, they waste the time,
yes,
and focus on the people who do have the propensity to give, then they will get on much better. But so the obvious question from that is, how does a fundraiser identify the person who has the propensity to give and dismiss the ones who don't?
By talking to the people that are the closest to the cause and give the absolute most to work out what it is about that cause that meets that person's need states, and by leveraging that message when going out.
So how, you use the word need state, and I'd never heard that word before. I don't know whether you have. Can you, what do you mean by need state?
Cheesy marketing. So the basic premise that we all behaviourally are driven by basic needs. It's a reskinning of, whether it's Maslow or otherwise, of what it is that we need to, on a daily basis, have the parts of us that need to be satiated in order to go about our business. And if someone needs from their charity to feel like everything's not a disaster, we would call that we need them to feel less helpless. If someone is particularly, I find this very often with mid-value donors, we've spent a lot of time talking about mid-value donors over the years, but if somebody is quite educated and quite informed, and they especially think they are, they will have a quite intense need for a charity to leverage those parts of their personality, to make them feel like they've made a good, clever decision, to furnish them with information that makes them feel even more involved and intellectually enriched by whatever it is that has been presented to them. Or it could be as playful and silly as you talk a lot about. We still calling them entertainment need states. What do we call them these days? The tickling people need state.
We have 4 that we really have identified over the years. And as Amber said, one is combat helplessness. Another one is personal development. So demonstrating to the internal and the external audience that you're a good person. And we have two others. One of them is to help to tackle that problem, going back to that initial point, that what is that relevant problem that you care about. And the final one, and we always struggle with the right name for this, I'm using emotional reward these days, but in the past we've actually called it entertainment. So it's engaged with an organization, or engaged in giving, that gives you that sense that gives you a level of insight, gives you that a level of emotional reward. It might be humor, it might be
it's the dopamine fix.
Yeah, the fact that you're feeling good about what you've done, and we've refined, and there are the 4, but need states extend to everything.
Yes.
The model that we initially copied at Bluefrog was that produced by Coca-Cola, because you imagine you've got a brown fizzy drink, but if you look at how Coca-Cola market their product, it's massive. The latest iteration of Coca-Colas, if you look at the bottles, they've got their name on. You go in, you search through there, and you find, there's my name. There's a charitable version where, which is done by the I can't remember which charity it is, but there's a bit like the Royal British Legion in the US, where they actually put the names of serving soldiers on real names on Coke, and you can buy those. Yeah, the one that I always use is that there are various Cokes that you can buy that have got minerals added, they've got vitamins added, they've got green tea added. So there's almost a health version, and this really comes into its own when you understand that in the southern states of America, that Coca-Cola is used actually as a lubricant for cereal.
What?
Yeah, you don't.
Shut up.
Yeah, no. They put Coke on cereal in the southern states in America. So if you're a parent and your child is putting Coca-Cola on your cereal, you think, how can I make that parent feel better about that? Or I'll give them Coca-Cola with vitamins and minerals, which helps tackle that. So, but they're the broad 4 that we, that we work with.
And the key is, it's very fluid. Like we talk about them. Why do I keep doing that? We talk about them in as if they're 4 separate boxes. It's all very fluid. The key, the golden chalice, is finding what it is about that group of donors and what it is about the work that the charity does that can be combined to meet each given need. And then there's your creative.
Can I come in?
Doors open, Giles. Come charging through.
And take a stage back. So you've got your four, and the two that I've written down are emotional reward and personal development. So hold those, and can I get back to Amber? Could you mention Maslow?
Yes.
And as Mark knows, I'm a great fan of Maslow, and if you don't know about it, guys, find out. So at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you've got kind of air, water, etc., and then they go up. And then the three top ones are personal fulfillment, family, life, etc., esteem, your job, your career, etc. And for most people, that's as far as they get. Very few people get to the final top stage, which is self-actualization. And self-actualization, sorry guys, self-actualization is defined by Maslow as being the best that you can be.
Yes.
Now, I believe that a donor who gives £1 million, say, is probably doing that for self-actualization. When they're on their deathbed, they will know that they've had a good family. They will know that they've done well in their jobs. But the thing that they remember is that they changed the lives of children by giving £1 million. And I think we often forget that. I mean, it builds on what you're saying, Amber. People want to give. They want to achieve self-actualization. And do you think self-actualization applies just to big donors or little donors?
No, you're giving to capacity in your mind. And I think it's, I mean, I'm going to state the obvious, but it's not necessarily giving it a penny volunteering to doing. And I think it's interesting. Everyone that I speak to, they have their bar and they draw the line where they draw it for themselves as pertains to how much of themselves they want to give away. I rarely meet people, however, who will entertain even for a moment that they're doing as much as they would like to be able. And so part of it is posturing, virtue signaling, and not wanting to say to the interviewer, or unless you them for a whole hour, that they genuinely believe they're a wonderful person. But it's quite hard to find someone that feels that. Go on.
And we have to emphasize that point because it's really important. So, one of the things that we do in fundraising, obviously, when we're looking at copy, we talk about saying things, you're wonderful, you're great, you've done this amazing thing. If somebody is a multimillionaire and they're giving you a few hundred or a few £1,000s, they do not think they have done a marvelous thing.
No.
They know they are not giving to capacity. And if you overemphasize that, it doesn't work on them. You have to give your, whether it's praise or whether it's recognition or whatever it is, it has to be relevant for that person and that gift. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And they will say, don't call me brilliant. I'm not brilliant. I've given you a few grand.
So let's come back to that. So what you're saying is there are some people that have decided to give less than they're able to give.
They've not necessarily, they've not been motivated. Often it's what's the pricing.
So can we come back to that in a moment? So why is it that they're not giving as much as they can is what you've said. But what Amber said is a lot of people, they would like to be able to do more. And just for a moment, can we just expand on those before we get to why people don't give what they can? Because do you, Amber, believe that the idea of self-actualization is in any way inconsistent with Mark's four ones, including personal, emotional, etc., or are they completely consistent?
They're not inconsistent. I just think it's only a tiny part of the picture for any person. Sorry to be controversial. I just think that you've got people who they might genuinely believe that they would like to give more, but then they'll reflect on how much risk is involved in giving more away, and then they'll tell themselves that it wouldn't be safe to give more away, so they don't have any negative need state, guilt, whatever you want to call it, for not giving away more. And then this idea, and this becomes complicated and cultural, but then this idea of what we're calling self-actualization will start to come from other places, you get religion, or whether it's being a better parent or whatever it might be. So I don't believe my challenge as someone that I was saying this to you earlier, I don't sit with the data. I sit with the donors, and my challenge is And one of my frustrations is I listen to fundraisers talk about the figures and what's working and what's not working, and I think they sometimes forget that for the donor, even though whether it's whatever charity it might be the third most important thing in their entire world, but it's not the first or second most important thing.
But even if it's the third, I think we're doing pretty well.
Yes,
but
not enough to self-actualize.
No. That's only a few. But Mark, I interrupted you. What you were asking, what I think was, why is it that a lot of people who are wealthy don't give as much as they could afford to? Was that your question?
No, it's I think I probably know some of the answers, but but it's often how they're motivated, how we communicate with them. One of the things that we find with mid value, and we really discovered this in the US, was that when a charity gets in touch with a mid value donor and says, can we have some money? And they might be asking for $25-50. The donor literally looks at that communication, whether it's an email or whether it's a mailing pack, and think, oh, they've screwed up there. They've made a massive mistake, idiots. Why are they asking me for that? And it's literally that response. Amber, is that?
Hang on, why are you here as well?
Yeah, but we discovered it in the US.
Okay, no, fair enough.
That's what because the point that Amber was making earlier on is, when you're doing research, you want to be with the people who've got the biggest connection and they're most motivated, because everything is magnified. And one of the things and this is when we first found this.
And it does trickle down.
Yeah.
Sorry to state the obvious, but that's the point. It's a project it's a bit like the early adopter malarkey. Like that's, you learn from them what will trickle down and work for everyone else.
And that's one of the things that we do. When we identify something in one country, we test it in another. So when that becomes super apparent, this was a dozen years ago. I think you discovered this point on that US. We started testing it in other countries, and the nuance is different. Like the nuance is different in Ireland to it is in the UK. Then the nuance is different in Australia as it is into the UK. There's very many different elements that they're impacting on why people give, what will cause them to give more, what will cause them to give less. Sometimes that's religion, sometimes it's social factors. But there's a lot of elements there. But when you're speaking to enough people, these points start coming out.
Okay, we talked a lot about why people give. Do you mind if we move on to why people stop giving? Are you all right? Have you done enough on why? Okay, good. Thank you, Mark.
I love a bit of lapsing.
We've done a lot of lapsing.
Done a lot of lapsing
in our time. Because you've got 2 points really. You've got why people don't give, full stop, and we hardly speak to them, do we?
But that's only because, I don't mean to speak out of turn, but there's not much, because it's a dead end.
Yeah.
You'd have to have more money than you knew what to do with to put money into researching it. We've never had impetus to do it.
Yeah. Because that's the thing about us. We only really speak to donors, and then that comes to the other point. Why do they stop giving? And we've done a couple of studies over recent years looking specifically at why they're stopping, why they're skipping. And that's been magnified since COVID, really. That people got, I suppose, a good experience of giving during COVID.
Yeah.
They suddenly were part of this global movement to beat a disease, and they loved it. And then business as usual.
Okay, at the risk of stating the obvious, what I'm going to start off by saying, there are a lot of people who don't have the propensity to give, and we ignore them at the beginning. But once they've started to give, they do have the propensity to give. Yeah. So why do they stop giving?
Well, what we realised a long time ago, so long ago we first started thinking this, was most people, if they have a portfolio of charities, they'll have an unspoken or a silent hierarchy in their minds of the charities that will go from combinations of the most important to them because they're the most relevant and personal to them, which will be tempered by how the charity that is their vehicle for supporting that cause is making that donor feel. And you therefore go full circle. If the charity in question is failing to give the donor what they need for supporting that cause, the donor doesn't really have a reason to stay, unless it's the only charity that does that work and the cause is so important to them that they couldn't possibly walk away. It's about, I've not met, apart from, as you would expect, because of completely external circumstances, when someone's literally lost their job or they've run out, but park those, there's nothing we can do about those, they're external. I've not met, and I've met hundreds of lapsers. There was a period where we were almost exclusively talking to lapsers, which is quite difficult, by the way, because you have to find them and then persuade them that they're doing a good deed to talk to them. Anyway, because a lot of them are cross with the charities, because they may have been or felt they've been pushed away by the charities. There's always something that, not necessarily something terrible or negative that the charity did, but it will be somewhere between that and something the charity failed to do properly that meant the donor could forget about them or no longer be motivated to keep them on that Christmas list, or whatever it might be. Or when they're going through their, little old lady sitting there, she's got 12 charities on her direct debits, and her son-in-law sat down with her and said, look, Eileen, you got too many going on here. You need to cull 3. Which 3 is she going to cull? It was what the charity hadn't quite done well.
Amber, that's music to my ears.
Uh-oh.
I didn't know you were going to say that, but it's music to my ears, because Mark and I talked about this when we were talking about regular giving a while ago. And some people say to me, people decide to give to one charity for a period of time, and so I'm going to stop giving that charity and give to another charity. But I've never met a donor that said, I love giving to NSPCC, but I'm going to stop in 3 years' time and start giving to cancer research. It doesn't happen.
It happens infrequently. Only because I've spoken to so many, but it's not that often.
Yeah,
really
and my guess is that for a lot of those that you've spoken to, it's an excuse. Because if the charities failed, and if we talk about personal, emotional, hierarchy of needs, etc., let me take a hypothesis. Supposing every communication that a donor receives from a charity makes them feel better after it than before it.
Yes.
Even an appeal mailing, they will feel better not having given afterwards than before it, because of the way that the appeal is written. It's about giving the opportunity to give, not about please, please, please. I get emails from charities, I will give £30, give £30 today. And it feels wrong. So supposing every communication makes them feel better after it than before it, why shouldn't we get attrition down to 1%?
Would engage enough in an array of communication for that to be the emotional reaction.
Okay,
let's say you could get but if you could get within the cell whereby people were engaging in it and the communication was the quality described, then why not?
Okay, well, you did pause and you said, I can't imagine. But I'm going to push back. Hang on. I'm going to push back on you. Mark knows me. I'm going to push back on you. I think a lot of the communication that I receive as a mystery shopper, they're inside out. They're about what the charity wants to tell the supporter. It's always, what the charity wants. I think really good charities are outside in. That you think, what is it the donor wants to hear? What do they need in the words that you used earlier?
Yes.
And if every communication is framed in such a way that it's meeting the donor's needs and wants, then I would say, even though you say it's a stretch, and I accept it's a stretch, but why isn't it possible that the charity that really sets out to make sure that every communication makes them feel better after than before, why shouldn't you aim for 1%? Aim for 1%.
Aim for 1%, I'll accept.
You're done.
Right.
I hand back over to Mark.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, it's...
I think we have to make a point here.
What?
You've got to look why somebody might give in the first place. Is somebody giving in the first place because they actually care about that work and they want it? Or is somebody giving in the first place because they're too embarrassed to say no to a face-to-face person? I think that's the point that we've got to take into account. That what do you want from your money at that point of sign up? Because for me, on that 1%, I think that 1% is impossible. I think it's impossible because you will have too many disruptions in people's lives, i.e., something goes wrong, someone loses a job, and they're managing budgets. But number two is, what is the active reason for them to give and retain that organization? And it might be that you can still you send people things saying, look, you've done X, Y, and Z, this is fabulous. I think even at that point, when there is stress, you're gonna go. And I still think 1% is an impossible target.
Bear with me, Andy. I need to push back. So if you take face-to-face fundraising, we know that people signed up on face-to-face fundraising, 50% of them will lapse in the course of 6 months or a year. They were never really donors. They were transactional.
Absolutely.
Relationships. Thank you for nodding, Amber. Those are donors that never felt really better about themselves. They never felt if they didn't give, they'd be rubbish. They never had personal development.
And they might be some of the donors that have thought, I'll only do this for 6 months, or I'll do it for a year, because they haven't got that level of commitment.
On my 1%, let me come back. Supposing a donor has been a regular giver for 3 years.
Yes.
Why should you not aim for 1%?
Then,
Question.
Yeah, on that point, if you have got someone who cares about the cause, I still think 1% is going to be too steep. You've got to take into account deaths and things of that nature.
Well, hang on, and the cause becoming less relevant to them as per the reason that they got involved in the first place. You were talking about life events. You said, or you said stress. Anyway, I might, again, I'm going to state the obvious, but I might start donating charity X because it's related to. God forbid, but I watched someone dying in a hospice, and the idea of a good death is the most important thing to me in the whole world. And for every year that passes, that will by definition become less relevant to me, and something else might trump it. So I'm not, but the premise that we should be aiming far, far, far higher, don't think that anybody would.
I think
just my 1% target is, you know me. I'm pushing at the margins. I'm not suggesting ever that it would be real, but why shouldn't we aim at it? And I think Amber is saying we should be a lot better than we are. We somehow accept 8%, 10% attrition rates as if they were normal.
I think
we look at year on year on year.
Some people will bite your arm off for 5 or 10% attrition rates on their RG. I think that's when you're getting into the realms of reality. But we know if somebody's been giving you a regular gift for 7 or 8 years, then you'll probably be looking at an attrition rate of about 5%. And I think that's becoming the norm. But then within that 5%, as well as changing life circumstance, somebody dies, or, we know this from legacies. We've recently done a study on legacy giving. Somebody is pledged to leave a legacy to a charity, has written to them, you're in my will.
And then lapsed.
Yeah. And then 20 years later, they've taken them out of the will. Why is that? And one of the points, as Amber will say, is 20 years ago, their mum died of heart disease. Nobody else has died from heart disease in the next 20 years, but your son's got severe arthritis. What are you going to give to? You're going to shift it to arthritis research. Because the passage of time has softened that relationship. That's what we found. One of the strongest bonds is spousal bonds.
Yeah.
That's different to a parental bond. So all of these points come into play when you're looking at retention, whatever it is. But I agree 100%. If you treat people well, if you answer their needs, that is the best way to keep them. And I think what we're arguing about is the percentage that is reasonable.
Yeah, but I shouldn't interrupt Amber since she's our guest. But if you take, the need is no longer relevant. I've moved on to something else. And what Amber said at the beginning, the charity has failed them. I think more often than not, it's going to be the charity failing them rather than the cause not being relevant. Amber, would you agree?
I agree that charities could keep far more people on at a lower level. They may fail to develop them because, as per what you just said, the cause has become less relevant or otherwise. But yes, the sector should be ashamed of itself. If we can't keep people on at a very low level, that's absurd. And
Yeah, I agree. And let's look at the data. What percentage of the GDP in the UK is given to charity? It's about 0.5%. It's next to nothing. It is literally next to nothing. And we tackle the most important problems in the world. Why do we just generate 0.5? Why do we raise 0.5% of GDP when we tackle the things that people most care about? That to me is the most shocking factor, that we haven't normalized the fact that, whatever, let's go to that 1%. If we could normalize that we should give 1% of our income to charity, we are dramatically changing the charitable landscape. But we don't do that. What we do, and what many organizations have done, is they forced it down. We go back to £2 a month, £3 a month. That shows how little you need to do to be good, rather than what you could achieve through your goodness. And I think that is one of the big problems we face. And there's organizations out there that plug these rubbish low value gifts. Oh, just £2 a month, just £3 a month. It's the wrong way to look at how we tackle poverty, how we cure disease, how we tackle injustice. It shouldn't be how little. It's what you could do if you really care.
Yeah.
I think that's the message, and we don't deliver that as a sector. Now I'll get off my soapbox.
and you're going to agree, aren't you?
I'm gonna agree, but I don't. I'm less agitated by it, because I don't think there's a lack of. This is so patronising, but I don't think there's a lack of understanding by people at mid levels at these charities that that's what they need to do. I think that there is, and I'm not way sideways of my pay grade to be passing comments on the structure of charities and fundraising departments, because with the barge pole, but it would feel to me, as someone that's just on the edge informing creative briefs, that what often happens is those people are under so much pressure to get new donors in, and they're not as powerful as the people who are, old and boring like us, saying, actually, you're not keeping your proper donors sweet. Why have you given that department all of this budget to go and collect people for £2 a month off the street? But I don't have a fix for that, and I would.
Yeah, but let's look at that as a structural problem.
Yes,
it's one of the things that I always say. Okay, you've got an acquisition department and you've got a development department. The acquisition department are being judged on the numbers of people coming through the door. Bung out a pound pack, get a 20% response rate. There you go. I brought in 100,000 donors this year. But they're worthless, absolutely worthless. They hand them over to the development, and it's like, what can we do with this?
It's even worse. They'll build, now I'm going to get on my soapbox. So they'll build a product that isn't asking for that tiny amount. It's asking for slightly more, because they'll go, well, we understand we need to ask for slightly more. And they'll build some flashy new product that looks exciting, but really it's just a slightly more sexy version of a low value product that's relevant to whatever the zeitgeist is in those 2 years, because we're all, I don't know, anxious or angry or whatever it is, whatever button's pressable. Am I making sense? That year, but then that's not reinforcing that donor's connection to that cause. That's dangling the shiny in front of them to get them through the front door, and then failing to retain them. Okay, I'm getting off my soapbox.
No, I think it's a good. I remember years ago we had a line, about the pound pack that we used to run. You'd open it up, and it said, "When it costs so little, how can you say no?" That was a line that we would use, and it was incredibly effective at that point at bringing on prospects. It was a 2-step program, but we would only be able to convert a small number of those people, 5, 6, 7, 8%, to actually become regular givers. And in effect, knowing what I do now, I'd never run a line like that. My line that I would run now, and it would twist that, and it would be something like, when so much can be achieved, how can you not come on board an organization like this? It would be a much more an emotional, goal oriented approach, rather than saying, oh, come on, it's only a couple of quid. And if you're at the point where, come on, it's only a couple of quid is your offer, there is something seriously wrong with your strategic approach. And sadly, that's where we are.
And that's the pressure to get more donors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think your point is the pressure is on fundraisers to get more donors. Now, if you go back to when I started fundraising, people were able to make a profit on recruitment.
Right.
Now,
technically, you still can.
Okay. They come to Bluefrog and you'll tell them how to do it.
Oh yeah. I can get you a positive response on recruitment, particularly in the run up to Christmas.
But it is, I'm sure even you would agree, Mark, that it is getting more and more expensive to recruit new donors. So
depends who you're going after and why and how.
In general?
It depends what your offer is. If you are going out through the right medium with the right offer to the right audience of higher value donors, top decile,
yes, top,
it's relatively easy at the moment. I think it's a really good time for fundraising. The problem is those people going out saying £2-3 a month or 20 quid from a mass of people that are financially squeezed.
And they're the younger teams have been charged with doing that, so they don't
and
have guts to go higher.
Yeah, and younger donors. Oh, we want younger donors. Younger donors are hammered at the moment. There is no money around, and when I say younger, I mean people with, growing families on down, that squeeze middle, you're looking after your mum and dad who are not well. You've got children, growing up, growing out of clothes, wanting to go on school trips and such like. You have no money, you have no bandwidth. You've got to get beyond that, really, before, you can start thinking about self-actualization.
Okay. Quite right, Mark. But we missed something that Amber said, which you and I feel passionate about. You talk about younger teams.
Sorry,
expand.
I'm going to get in trouble now. I feel like you, because we don't have to put this in, do we? I just speak out.
It's going in.
Oh, don't say that. Is it? It's not really. Okay, we'll see. I feel like, because as is the vicious cycle, as with all public sector or non-profit industries or departments, because there's not enough money to pay brilliant people who would otherwise be off working at Google or otherwise. What you have is young, enthusiastic people. We were like that. So I'm not, a big hypocrite here. I loved all the new whatever. And if I was 20, not 40 something, almost 50 now, in working in some charity, I don't want to be doing things that have been done for 20 years. I want to be I want to get a budget and to be doing some new fun thing and then get my award for it. And so I'm not trying to give them a hard time. I'd be exactly the same. But I just think there's a disproportionate amount of freedom and budget going to that. Not that it should be taken away, but there feels like a bit of an imbalance, perhaps.
Yeah. You've got your 90-10, and it's always the case. Take 10% of your budget, spend it on innovation, test, see what you can come up with. 90% secure, bringing that money on, building that file, bringing those legacies on board. I think the problem comes when you start wanting to go into a new creative direction because you want to go into a new creative direction. When we look at rebrands, why rebrand?
Don't stop that again.
We can do that, but what happens when you do a rebrand, Amber? What do donors say?
Donors hate it. We know that. As in, right, donors that have money hate it. But then I get back on my soapbox. The point is that they're not the ones that are exciting to the people that have got the budget to do the.
Who's exciting to them?
The young people that have got no money. But we know all this.
We know it, but I don't know if the sector knows that. Why else would you have all these rebrands? And when you read the article in Third Sector or Civil Society or whatever you do, you look at the justification for the rebrand. Oh, because we want to go out and we want to get a younger demographic. We want to bring them on board. We want to raise more money. And do they ever achieve that? No.
If I don't want to talk myself out of a job, because I don't want everyone to go and do my job, because then I won't have a job. But if they went and spoke to lots of donors, they wouldn't do it.
Of course, exactly, but they don't. But why is that? Do they not?
Here's a question. No, that question. Why is that? Let's ask Giles. Giles is asking. Why is that, Giles? Why are, in your experience, or when you speak to clients, I genuinely have not had in 20 years, I've not had a straight answer. Why are more fundraising departments not forcing their interns or otherwise to go out and speak to more donors at the cost of nothing?
Because they think they know better. Hang on, because I get emails, I talked about, from the Save the Giraffe team. Now, if I was a 70-year-old or 50-year-old donor, I would want to hear from the Save the Giraffe team. I'd want to hear from Susan in the Sport and Services department.
Yes.
But I think younger people think that your target audience is a famous marketing phrase. I think a lot of the young people think that they are their target audience, and they don't go out to speak to the 55, 65, 75-year-old donors.
Yeah.
And they're absolutely start staring bonkers.
I think some of it is down to the fact that they don't that we can confuse advertising and fundraising. I was speaking to a brand agency the other week, and trying to give them some advice on how that they should look at rebranding a charity, and I literally said to them, what impact do you think a signatory has? And they looked at me like, what do you mean a signatory? And I said, one of the most effective ways for me to boost income is based on who is signing the letter that goes out. If it's the CEO that is known and loved, that person is going to generate far more than somebody else who works in a program that they've never really heard of. How are you going to incorporate that into your brand? Silence. Absolute silence. Nobody in that big brand agency that has rebranded loads of organizations actually thought about the voice of the humanity behind that charity. To them, it was this big amorphous blob. How do we make it look pretty?
And I'm less cross with them, though, because it's the charity that should know better. They should have been there in their brief. Sorry, I'm not defending the brand.
We can spin that the other way. But, the charity will look at the branding agency as being experts, and they believe them. So, just having two lumps of ignorance slammed together, at the end of the day, buyer beware. It's, you have to know what you are doing, and following a commercial model for the charity sector is fraught with difficulties because we are not a commercial setup. We are doing things for different reasons than people necessarily go out and buy a packet of crisps.
Mark, calm down, dear.
It's a metaphor for the US election was a metaphor for this, wasn't it? I'm just realising. Putting Beyonce on the stage. No one wanted.
Mark, you know me. I always like to try and keep to time, and we're coming up to the end of our hour. And I rather feel that you and I have been hogging this rather than. Well, I know you've said some wonderful things. Is there anything you came here wanting to say that you haven't said?
Oh my gosh. No, that was put.
If you had, let's ask that in a slightly different question. Let's ask it in a way that works for Amber. Okay.
I hate it.
Yeah. Let's ask that. If there were 1, 2, or maybe 3 messages that you would say to a fundraiser watching this about the truth about why people give, or what you would advise them to do as part of their job, or something that they would focus on, what would it be?
All right,
that's the question. Mark.
Right,
sorry, Amber.
Number one, right? You need to go out. You need to send, whether it's your interns or sensible people, ideally a range of people, to go out and talk to your more valuable donors and ask your more valuable donors. I don't mean in terms of finance valuable. I mean people that have been loyal and dedicated and demonstrated ideally multiple points of connection with you. Could be volunteers. Otherwise, you want to ask them, what is it about your relationship with this charity that you value the most. What is it that, if we were to give you 100 grand to spend on this charity, and you can't, the charity's going to get this money, you can't buy yourself a house or a boat, this is where it's going, and you are going to be forced to engage with the feedback that gets sent back to you. So don't tell me you want me to spend it how I see best. You're having to choose, Mr. Donor, Mrs. Donor. What would you most like hear about that your money is doing or achieving? What, you're going to be sat at your kitchen table reading the booklet about this feedback. What is going to be the least boring, the most interesting thing for you to engage in? And then I want the same person that's going out speaking to donors to try, and I know it's hard, but to try and find out within reason as much as they can about what that person's connection to that cause is. Not, oh, my grandma died of cancer, so I'm giving to cancer. What was it about the loss of your grandma, or what the charity did for your grandma, or what you learned afterwards about what could have happened for your grandma but didn't happen to your grandma, that made you angry or sad or whatever it might have been, that has reinforced your decision that these people deserve some money? Right, that's one question. What was the other question?
The three things you said, two of them.
Right.
I think. What was the third?
I don't know.
Unless you want to come in, I think those are fabulous answers, and I think that if fundraisers everywhere were to follow that advice in terms of listening to donors and finding out what they want, the loyal donors you talk about, the most valuable, not being the highest givers, but the ones that are most loyal, that give the longest. I think we could double income if we did that.
I've got one other question,
okay.
And this is for me. This is one of the things. Amber and I will spend hours literally debating this. Often, it might be on the phone, or normally on the phone at the moment. Obviously, we don't necessarily get to meet a huge amount of time at the moment. But one of the things that Amber has always done is she's always identified what's coming down the line. Amber identified. We've had a huge explosion in the idea behind trans rights. Amber was talking about that before, it really came to the fore, talking about injustice, particularly around COVID, Amber, identifying when people will turn against a political party and such like. It's coming down the tracks.
Oh, don't ask me that.
What have you got at the moment? What's bubbling under?
No, you can't. No, I'm not answering that. You've just got to, you've just got to keep your eyes open, just the same as a fund manager would. Keep watching everything.
But what things do you think are sparking around at the moment that you're picking up in conversations? Like, for example, if
all right, people are, but you could say this for 5 years ago. Yeah. It's a different type of scared. People are scared at the moment because of the unknown and the lack of control they have over
What are they scared of at the moment?
They're not. They are. Okay, so everyone I speak to, Giles, a lot of the people that I speak to, their concern is that every single time they thought that the biggest crisis that they thought was going to be the biggest crisis that they thought they were going to see, another one comes 4 months later. And what has happened, and this is very fresh in my mind because I just spent many hours talking to people. You mentioned it earlier, people playing around with what's in their wills. Taking things in and out of their wills because for sensible, obvious reasons, it's far easier to do that now. You don't have to trot down to the solicitor's office anymore. You can just pick up the phone. So people were talking about, my concern is I genuinely didn't think 20 years ago I would have to be worrying about how much I was leaving in this place or that place because there were known unknowns, not unknown.
I think
have we got one of the things we talk about is combating helplessness.
Yes.
Are we creating? Do we have at the moment a society which has become more in tuned to being helpless in the face of
despondent, complete and utter despondent, and the fantasy situation for a fundraiser would be that their charity could somehow give the donor a sense of
Control.
stability. I was going to say stability, but yeah, same difference in this conversation. That, or even if not real, I don't mean real control. I mean that could be a constant in their life. It's a stable thing. It may not necessarily directly give them any sense of stability, but it's something they can trust. It's independent of the government. It's independent of this. It's independent of that. And yeah, it would. Wouldn't that be? Wouldn't that be? Lovely?
It would.
There you go, Giles. You can.
Amber, it's been so good to meet you, and this has been such a fabulous session. I think you've given so much insight, and I just agree with every word you've said. Thank you.
Thank you. And you, I got to meet Giles.
Are we
Yeah,
done?
mutual admiration.
There you go. Amber, thank you very much. This is my life. You know, these conversations. She's been much more restrained because we're on camera than she normally is.
Sworn once.
She hasn't sworn once. But this is what we do constantly, but we're normally focused on specific problems. So there's a little insight. And maybe, you know, one of the things we could do, Amber, is have you back and maybe we'll talk about a specific area.
I can prepare next.
You don't need to prepare.
So we're all slightly scared about advertising ourselves, but just to tell the audience, Amber works for Mark in Bluefrog. Yes. So if you want Amber to apply her insight to your charity, get in touch with Mark, and you'll get in touch with Amber.
There you go.
Thank you, Giles.
She's our secret weapon, but she's also the reason why we piss everyone off because we tell them why they might be wrong in their strategies, and no one likes that.
Keep me in my box.
There we go. But what we apply from Amber works brilliantly, and I've been very pleased to be able to bring you a little bit of her genius today. Are we done?
Yes.
I think so. Thanks
Brilliant.
all for watching.
Thanks so much for watching.
Thank you.
Happy fundraising.
Happy fundraising.